Hey everyone. So the Korean Peninsula has been in the news a bunch recently, and I was planning on making a video describing my future policy prescriptions for the region. But I've noticed there are some videos floating around social media and articles floating around that provide a different picture of the history of how we got to where we are, and essentially pose an anti-war argument questioning whether or not the US was justified or on the right side of history in its war against those north of the 38th parallel. I wanted to look at the main arguments they make, provide rebuttals, and then once we can agree on history, to some degree at least, we can talk about the future. We don't have to be on the exact same page, but if we're in the same library, that would help. So I've discerned two or three main arguments that are made in these videos, and they're kind of connected to each other, as you'll see. But the first one is in regards to the sheer force that we used against the northern half of the peninsula. So that is, more bombs were dropped on Korea than in the Pacific Theater during all of World War II. We leveled entire cities, we killed thousands of civilians. None of these things were justified by the circumstances, and we shouldn't have been in the war in the first place because America is an imperialist power. These are the arguments that I'm discerning from the opposition. The second connected argument is that this justifies and makes understandable North Korea's hatred and isolation from the rest of the world, its constant calls for destruction of Japan and South Korea and the United States, and pretty much everyone that disagrees with it. None of this was manufactured by a sadistic and psychopathic crime family that's ran the whole place for 3 generations now. It's more due to U.S. imperialism and perceived grievances, etc., etc. And then the connected argument to that is that in present day, Trump wants to destroy their nuclear program. Is it a surprise that North Korea still feels threatened? There's a few different angles we could look at here. I think the first one we should do is what they miss in these videos. And I think the biggest problem here is that it assumes imperialism and aggression on the side of the United States. And one thing none of these videos or articles discuss is the initiation of the conflict. I think the reason they don't discuss it is because if they did, the argument would fall flat on its face. Because it was the northern half of the peninsula, North Korea, the communist side, that attacked the south originally and invaded and took over Seoul and pushed American forces, coalition forces, back to Busan, where we were on the verge of abandoning the peninsula altogether. It was very close to a lost war multiple times. Seoul exchanged sides 5 or 6 times during this war. It was close. So that idea, almost all of these arguments I've given you are couched in the fact that their grievances are justified because they were attacked. They're on the defensive, but that's not how the history actually pans out. North Korea was on the offensive. It started on the offensive. It tried to maintain the offensive. It tried to get rid of everyone who was against it. And it didn't quite work, and I think that's a good thing. But their lack of even a mention of the fact that the U.S. did not start this war, China didn't even start this war, this was just North Korea attempting to take the whole peninsula for itself. And this relates to all the points, because in terms of sheer force used, the force was initiated by the other side. And in retaliation, what you do, you have to take into account that you've already been attacked and you were almost pushed off the entire island peninsula before you decided to lay down the ordinance. And this idea that North Koreans hate us because of U.S. imperialism and violence and war crimes, etc., is a little bit rich, considering the fact that thousands of people are defecting from North Korea every year, and that number keeps going up as they get more connected to the outside world. These people don't hate Korea, they don't hate China, they don't hate the United States, they hate their leader for starving their people and isolating them and making them into a backwards country and forcing them to work until they die. That's who they have a hatred or a vitriol towards. It's their old leader, not the people who tried to liberate the entire country and successfully liberated half the country from a madman. And then if we fast forward to today, I mean, obviously these things are manufactured. Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il still hold positions in North Korea, head of office, head of state. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but it's basically a trinity, necrocracy, Christianity on earth type of thing now, because the father and the son are both dead, and we have Kim Jong-un now, who's this perfect Gulf master, doesn't poop, whatever the fucking wondrous, miraculous thing about him next is going to be. This is wholly manufactured by the North Korean side, which is exactly why they've completely isolated themselves from the rest of the world. Minus Dennis Rodman. And then so fast forward to today, Trump wants to destroy their nuclear program. Or should we be surprised that North Korea feels threatened? Again, this assumes that the aggression was initiated by the South, that the United States is an imperialist power here, and that it wants to control all of Korea instead of just the southern half, as if it actually controls the southern half. If we look at the aggression today, it all comes from the North. They are the ones with the artillery pointed at Seoul. They are the ones who constantly threaten all of their neighbors. The US, even China at this point, is basically just trying to keep them in check. And even China doesn't really want North Korea as a buffer anymore, because the consequences are not worth the benefits that they gain from that. And they don't even really need a buffer anymore, because they aren't wholly communist. China is becoming more similar to South Korea than it is to North Korea every year, so this trajectory is only going to make North Korea less and less useful for the Chinese. And then we can look at sort of how prosperous they've been since the war, and by any standard, you look at North Korea from a fucking satellite, however many thousands of miles in the air those satellites are taking pictures from, and you see they demonstrate or they illustrate how much electricity there is in the country, because at night you can see the lights, and in South Korea it looks like Paris, it looks like New York, it looks like any other Western country. It's completely lit up all over the place. Whether or not you think that's a good thing for the environment or whatever, there's some element of prosperity there. They have electricity, they have heat, they have light. You look at North Korea, you cannot distinguish it from the water that surrounds it on east and west. You can only distinguish it from South Korea and China to a degree. You can't distinguish it from the water. That's how little electricity there is in North Korea. That's how little lighting, that's how little heat that they have. If you look at exports and imports, the South totally crushes the North. If you look at the fact that North Korea essentially produces bombs and starves its people, and it's a leech, it's a parasite on the international community, because it takes almost 100, if not more than $100 million in aid every single year, whereas South Korea is known for Samsung, Kia, and Hyundai, and it gives almost 100 million or over 100 million in aid every year to other countries. You could look at this from almost any indicator, from internet usage to health to height to nourishment. Literally any factor you would want to look at. The only exception that I know of is the percentage of GDP that goes for military spending, where I believe North Korea spends 10 times more as a percentage, so 20% of its GDP or thereabouts, whereas South Korea spends less than 2%, I think, or around 2%. And even this is ironic, because if you look at the real dollars, South Korea spends almost 3 times more anyway, even when as a percentage it's 1/10 the spending. So you can clearly see which system works better, even in the areas where North Korea's comparative disadvantage is the smallest, or where its comparative advantage is the largest. It wants to focus all of its output on military. It still can't produce a third of the military that South Korea does. So I don't want to get into it that much more. I wanted to give a simple outline. Generally speaking, South Korea is a great success in the export of democracy to other places. And a lot of people don't like the idea of exporting democracy because it didn't really work in the Middle East. But that doesn't mean it can't work. It doesn't mean it hasn't worked in the past. In fact, if you look at history, almost everywhere you have democratic institutions or a federalized republic or something of the like, it was transplanted or exported there from another place that already had it. The only real exceptions to this are perhaps Britain and maybe the United States. But besides those two, almost everywhere else on Earth, Germany, Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, parts of South America, parts of Africa, parts of Southeast Asia, anywhere you look where capitalism and free markets and Western civilization essentially has taken hold, it was usually not a natural process. But that's all I have to say about this issue for now. In the future, hopefully I'll be making more videos like this where I'm just talking to you guys. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, let me know what you want to see next, and subscribe for more. Follow me on Twitter and Minds. Both of those are at Morphing Reality with no space. And I hope you enjoyed. Thanks again. Until next time.